Welcome to this episode of the Productivity Power Hour. Hey, Ron, how are you?
I'm great, Don. How are you?
Good. Couple weeks off. You have anything big going on?
Yeah, I mean, I had my third child, or maybe sort of distant third child. Maybe not the best idea, but couldn't be happier. Healthy baby, wife is healthy. But yeah, it's our last dance with the newborn. So I think we're gonna cap it at three. How about
Well,
you?
that means it promotes the second child to middle child now. So
It does, but she's already taken on middle child characteristics of her own volition. So she's a firecracker, whereas my oldest is, I don't know, sweet, nice, and gentle, and she's a firecracker. So we'll see. I was the middle child, Don. So I was always fighting with my younger brother, and then fighting with my older sister, and I was always wrong because the baby's the baby, and the oldest is the oldest. So sitting in the middle seat, if you will. But
right.
yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, so we had my son is the oldest, and then we had twins. So the
Oh,
twins for us is what sort of created the middle child, and it was kind of funny because it was like the whole dynamic of middle child just came out in twos. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, but
No, that's awesome. Twins are yeah, that's awesome. Double the fun.
yeah, it was a pleasant surprise by far, because I mean, if you go back, I mean, this is a ways now. Um of course, not back to the time whenever I was born, but at the same time, testing at that point in time, was one of those things where you didn't know initially whether or not, if you were having twins, they would kind of indicate all sorts of birth defects. So it was one of those things
Yeah,
where we were pleasantly surprised, I would say, on the opposite side of this thing, that hey, at the end, it turned out very positive, because we were looking at, hey, could you have a child that, who knows, maybe they, wouldn't make it very long, or I mean, there are plenty of things that can happen through the birth of a child, and we were blessed with two very healthy twins, so it
that's all. I
came
mean,
out
really, that's
perfect.
all you can ask for is healthy babies. Whether it's one, two, whatever, as long as they're healthy. Some people they deal with a lot of traumatic things. Through I mean, it's like giving birth isn't. It's a tough thing for women to go through, for babies to go through. So you just want everybody to be healthy and good afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So today we're talking about goal setting, and really talking about. I would like to get to the execution part, overall, because as much as I think setting them up in front is important, I also think that balanced approach of execution is also important. And I know you've been following these series as well, with sort of writing about it, and as well. So I mean, I feel like people get that additional benefit if they also follow you, and kind of follow the things that you're talking about and things like that. So yeah, would love to hear any sort of things that you have on your mind to get us started, maybe.
Yeah, so I actually just finished writing an article on this. I'll probably post it on LinkedIn. Here is a LinkedIn article shortly. But the way I think about goal setting and execution, I do think about them working together, but they are very separate things. And when I think about goals and execution, it's really around goals and objectives. And you have to be able to define both. And the way I think about goals is a state, it's a quantitative thing, it's results, it's where we want to get to, it's what we want to ultimately achieve, the benefit. Whereas an objective is kind of binomial. Did we do it or didn't we do it? And the doing the objectives, completing them, is what unlocks goals. So, if I were to, coach, let's say a college student that says, I want to be a doctor, my goal is to be a doctor, I would say, well, that's not really your goal. Your objective is to be a doctor. Your goal is to want to help people get healthier, help reduce cancer, help, whatever it is. and you'll have a series of objectives to get there. Getting your doctorate, going through your residency, getting into college, getting the finances for college, those type of things. When I talk to business professionals, we talk about goals as far as, your goal is to maybe increase revenue, or increase EBITDA. Maybe it's to reduce SG&A costs. And in order to do that, we're going to expand our sales force. That's an objective. We're going to introduce new products to market. We're going to, several other things within the business. And those objectives actually have those breakdown of objectives, it just continues to go down from there. If you're going to develop a new product, we have to do research. We have to do market research. We then have to, develop a prototype. We have to test it. And all of those sub-objectives have quantitative goals. So when I think about goals and objectives, they're very different. The two frameworks I like the best on are SMART objectives or goals, which really sort of hit all of those boxes as far as specific, measurable. I use attributable, not achievable, and I use realistic, not relevant. It's the same thing. They're just, it's a different format and then time bound. And then the other framework I like, Don, is OKRs, which is just simply what I've been saying, objectives and key results. Objectives are the things that we're going to do. The key results are the goals, the quantitative state that we want to get to. So that's how I think about it. It's not too complicated, but there are a lot of people, I think, that put the cart before the horse. They will think about, we need to do this. We need to do this and do this objective, but they don't have performance in mind. Mm-hmm. They don't know what needles that they're moving. And on the other side, I've seen, and especially this is something the U.S. Army does, they are very quantitatively focused oftentimes, and they're not as focused on the objectives and things to do to get there, especially from a personnel readiness standpoint. So, browbeating people about numbers. We need to hit the performance, but we're not actually talking about, we know that that's the performance we need to get to, but we're doing the wrong things. We've got the wrong objectives. We've got the wrong projects. So I've said a lot there. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you have another a way to interpret it, but that's how I think about it, Don.
I don't think I'm far off from where you are. I guess there are a couple of thoughts that I have, depending on the organization that you're in. I feel like there's let's say you're in a brand new organization that doesn't have goals today. That's sort of one set of an organization. And I mean, I've had conversations before, and I think we may have talked about it in our previous, productivity power hour, that the conversation I've had is really interesting because, I mean, given your military background, the individual that I have in mind was long-term military officer, blah, 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 had led people forever. Right. And the conversation we were having was, look, yes, you should set goals. There should be goals that are clearly ones that have to get done to support the organization. These are clear in terms of, look, if these don't happen, the primary things that we're trying to get done inside the organization fall apart. Then there are stretch goals. And whenever it comes to stretch goals, there should be a portion of that you just understand as a leader that, look, maybe people make 50% of this stretch goal, but honestly, it moves the ball so much further down the field. I don't frankly care if they don't make 100% of this particular goal. It's, something that's meant to stretch people. And what was interesting in this conversation, it was a very sort of top-down kind of thinking that was happening inside of this particular leader's mind, was that no, if they don't make 100%, there's no way that those individuals could do well inside of my organization. And I was like, well, I mean, what if it's, to use your revenue example, look, we are going to grow our revenue. We have to grow our revenue by X percent. Let's say, 20, 30% in the next year to be able to achieve our goals. we also are going to set a stretch goal of another 100% so that we can see how much of the game that we can absolutely change, right? Because we have a great product, we have, you know, great people, great salespeople that are out there, and they're doing a phenomenal job, and we're going to do everything we can to empower them with marketing and blah 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 to fully support that. And his mind just could not get off this idea that, look, if they don't achieve 100% of that stretch goal, then there's no way that they could do well inside the organization. We might actually think about terminating them. And I was like, I was pretty surprised by this conversation. I was just like, okay, maybe, you know, maybe you need to recalibrate before we go rolling out goals, because if we do this and you absolutely, you know, torch half the organization because they didn't make their stretch goals, you know, what does that say to everybody? And if you only do it to a couple people, then it even says even more about, you know, where we currently are as well. And so, yeah, so I wanted to talk about that. And then secondarily, I feel like big organizations get this all the time, right? There's a goal setting period. There's a, you know, everybody kind of aligns typically to, you know, where the organization is going. And there's a process and expectation, I feel like, behind it as well. And I think whenever you get to the, you know, small to medium sized organizations, it's like, look, you primarily need to just get these in place and get going, and then find your way, right? Versus, you know, having some giant process that was taken from corporate America. Because I feel like, you know, OKRs is a great example. And, you know, if you thought that you could fully implement OKRs the way that Google did, most likely that's going to be a bit of overkill if you're like a 20-person organization or 30-person organization. You may as well like track your stuff on a spreadsheet, meet once a week, and talk about where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so Don, I think I completely agree with both of your points. So I'll sort of start with the first point about where you were going with prioritizing goals and stretch goals. So it reminds me again of my time in the military, and certainly there's time in business as well. But you know, I had this commander once that was so he was so fixated on the rifle in the marksmanship qualification in being over 95%. Had to be over 95%. And, you know, I think we were somewhere around 89%. And, you know, we had a handful of people that were struggling, and we put so much effort and time and discussion to try to get from this 89% to 95%. But in reality, all we needed to do in order to be qualified to go overseas and to be ready was to be over 75% of all the soldiers individually qualified. Same thing with things like height and weight. So there comes a point where the marginal benefit isn't greater than the marginal cost, you know, of getting there. It's sort of like, you know, when people were in college, you know, it's not that hard to get B's. To go from a C to a B isn't that hard. To go from a B to an A is much harder. So, you know, you have to sort of determine how much effort you know, should be putting in based on everything else you have going on, because there's so many other priorities. In the case of this commander, there were so many other things broken in the unit, as far as height and weight, as far as training on collective tasks and things like that, where, you know, that's where a lot of our energy needed to be focused. And he was fixated on, you know, trying to get to that stretch goal. And that's what you would call it. It's a stretch goal. So, you know, I think stretch goals are great. Everybody should have them. But also at the same time, when you talk to professionals, you know, sometimes you just need to level with them. Hey, I just need you to get this. If you can just get here, it's good enough. I'd like you to get here. If you can reach out and grab the stars, that's great. But if you just come back with the moon, we'll take it. But all I really need you to do is get in orbit, right? That's the minimum. So, you know, part of having that conversation is making sure people understand. I think sometimes leaders are afraid to have that conversation because people will go, well, I'll just do the minimum. And I don't think anybody thinks like that. But resources are finite, right? There's only so many things you can do. So you've got to be able to make a decision on, you know, sometimes it's called rubber balls and glass balls. Like, what are the rubber balls that, will keep bouncing, and what are the glass balls you have to grab so they don't break. Sometimes some things are just going to be good enough, or just part way through the stretch goal, and you've got to put out other fires. So I definitely agree with that. And to your second point, which I'm sorry, can you remind me your second point again?
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, that it's, I feel like inside of large organizations, implementing goals is one thing, but in a small organization, it's just more or less like get started. Don't like overcomplicate things, because I mean, I for the for for one of the organizations I was working with, we developed this whole thing and decisioning criteria and like a rollout plan and everything else, and we got all the way to the end, and only for the HR leader at the time to say, "Hey, I think if we put this in, it's going to shut a lot of people down." And I honestly disagree. I mean, I kind of with where you were just going, as well with your last point, that I feel like, you know, getting going is most important.
Yeah, I'm with you. So that's typically because I typically work with mid-market clients. Sometimes, like recently I work with Moderna. That's more of a blue chip type client. But when you're working with mid-market or small clients, that come from blue chip companies, they come from these organizations where they have a very structured way annually, of redefining their goals, redefining their objectives and KPIs, and cascading that down, having that in the professional development plans of the leaders, so then they can set deliverables for their people. And it's all great. And we all like that. And we all like to put that in cute little systems so that we can track it and all these things, right? But, it works if you're a big Fortune 500 company, and you've got the resources, you've got the infrastructure. When you're talking about smaller companies, I like the term scrappy. Let's just be scrappy. What are the painful things going on right now? Let's write it up here on the board. Let's just start there. And here are the three goals, the three, what performance do we want to get? And then here are the three actions we need to take in order to get those three things. Let's just start there. Let's meet every week or whatever it is, every other day, whatever we need to do. And naturally, we'll start to develop artifacts. We'll start to develop trackers. We'll start to develop the things that we need. They'll naturally start making their way into conversations with people as they set deliverables, and they'll naturally start to, be written down. But when you try to come in and say, we need to do everything the way, like you said, Google does it or the US Army does it, it's too much for people. And it just doesn't make sense, where ultimately you just need to sit down and say, hey guys, what are the most important things to work on? That's where we set our goals. That's how we start things, because that will inform our objectives. That will inform the deliverables that we're doing. We'll be able to sort of discern, like you said, between what's the minimum we need to get done with these goals, what are our stretch goals, and you just sort of let the energy and volition take you. The longer it takes to have grown-up conversations, and the longer you're working on the cute little frameworks of how things go, I think and I say that deliberately when I say cute little, because I'm trying to get people to understand that that's really what it is. It's like when you watch hockey, they call it getting cute with the puck. And where you're dancing around trying to get this fancy goal, just shoot it. Let's just start putting shots on net.
Yeah.
We got to start going. Because especially as you're in smaller organizations, it's more pressing to get results. You're typically going through series of funding. You might not have a ton of runway. Your cash burn is large each month, and you've got to hit certain milestones. If you're a blue chip company that you're doing millions in EBITDA every year, you've got plenty of cash to screw around with anything you want, or to take chances and really hone in on something. But you've got to get going in smaller organizations. So again, I agree with both points on the sort of the stretch goals, the prioritization, and just getting started and simplifying the process for companies. that they're filled with Fortune. And I've seen this a lot. One more point on this, because I trade stocks quite a bit. What you'll find is, maybe a new company that's a startup or a SPAC or something like that. And they've taken folks. Oh, we have Tesla folks. We've got Coca-Cola folks. We've got Google folks. And while what they've done is impressive at that company, a lot of these companies go bankrupt or they go through reverse stock splits. And it's not that these people are bad leaders. They're not typically great leaders at that scale. And they're trying to do, put Tesla frameworks in place for a company that, it doesn't mean we can't learn from Tesla, but we've got to be more pragmatic and actually get things done. We can't be in this state of pre-revenue forever while we set up this blue chip infrastructure for a company of, a couple hundred people. So that's sort of my last soapbox there. Don, I'll hand the mic to you.
I think it's important to touch on, and I think we should talk a little bit more about sort of that initial implementation as well. But I was recently asked, sort of, because I've done a fair amount of turnarounds, I've done a fair amount of activities in scaling organizations hundreds of times from of where they currently are, helping them grow from 20 to 250 people. To, on top of that, more than quadrupling their revenue, et cetera. Right. So, so essentially, I've been through a lot of these turns in my career. And I was asked recently, what's the difference between, companies that are, let's say, in that initial startup phase versus, companies that are scaling. And I said, to me, it's just two things. Number one, their focus is laser focused. If you can sort of pinpoint people, and I've heard this about, I think it was Amazon, where essentially Jeff Bezos had said something like, look, we are going to focus on one thing, not 5, not 10, one. And that one thing is the only thing that's most important. And the story that I heard was something like, he would walk into a room, somebody would say, oh, by the way, we're talking about XYZ, and it's not related to the one thing. He would get up and walk out. Yeah. And so that focus and that sort of just being a tyrant with regards to, hey, look, we're going to be really good at this and only focus here and not focus at a bunch of places and try and move kind of the blob forward is important. The second one is just an absolute sort of bias towards action, right? So this just making sure that every day you're making progress towards that goal, right? So whatever it is that you're focusing on, taking those steps to make sure that you are making, positive steps forward every single day is, the second part. And I found it interesting because the more we kept talking about it, I'm like, look, I can't think of, any other thing that I would add to that list. It's two simple things, which ties to our conversation today in a lot of ways, because I think if you had that one level of focus or, had whatever your company goal is, I still think in terms of implementation, and love to hear your perspective on this, the best way to implement it is to turn it back to the people that you lead, or turn it back to the managers and essentially say, okay, so this is our one goal. What are the things that you're doing that, could help that goal? Or what are other goals that also are in support of that one goal? And so by having that, level of cascading that happens, it points the direction for the organization all in one point, but it also sort of forces an initial conversation between, let's say, the senior executive team and the managers, and then from the managers to the people, if you're, 2 or 3 layers inside of the organization, to happen. And then you wind up with this personalization of, this is what I do to contribute to that one thing. And to me, it's that simple. But at the same time, this is not an easy thing to implement. I've been through it a few times, and I feel like the conversations sort of swirl before you get to that point where somebody is like, okay, I get it. I understand now how I can set a goal. I could use the SMART acronym to set that goal, and then I could sort of build my activities or objectives behind that that will be in support of that as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with the one, the one priority sort of model. My dad would always say, if you have more than one priority, you have no priorities. He would always say that, and I think it's true. If you're able to get a culture in a business where everybody is laser focused on that one goal, I mean, really, nothing can stop them. Because, like you said, let's say the goal is you have to watch as you communicate these things with companies, instead of saying in an executive team, it might be to get to a certain amount of revenue. But really, in order to get there, you have to open, let's say something like, I don't know, I'm going back to like looking at Chipotle. We want to open X amount of stores, over the next year, something like that. That's something everybody can get behind, right? Like we want to open this many stores. So, as you cascade that down, everybody understands, whether they're in the commercial arm of the business, the operating arm, the innovation arm, the support arm, that's what we're doing. We need to open 20 new or 200 new stores a year, whatever it is. We need to make X new widgets every year, for the market. And people really can get behind that and becomes something bigger than themselves, and just focus on that one thing. In certain cases, that's going to require some people to work on lean type of things. That's going to require other people to work on capacity things, expand their teams. Like, they'll be able to translate what that means to their departments, so that they can inform what are those key objectives that will unlock those goals. So it is very powerful. And the reason I go back to that, I'm trying to remember, it's not Sephora, there's an Alta. So I used to play a little bit with Alta stock, but I always liked their annual shareholder meeting, because they were so laser focused on, we are opening this many more stores this year. We're opening more stores next year. That is what we're doing. And that's what the CEO would say over and over again. And it would, that would permeate through the people that bought the stock, the stakeholders, the executive team, the people that worked there. I mean, you could tell everybody knew that's what we're doing. We're opening stores. And it's as simple as that, right? That's our priority. So I definitely, agree with you there. And yeah, I mean, I think, if you have more than one priority, you have no priorities. And, as far as execution goes, I mean, people, the functional groups in the business, if you can give them that clarity of what that goal is, they will be able to execute it. You don't want to get caught up in telling them this is how to get there and do that as a senior management team. Your junior VPs, your directors, your managers, they'll know what to do. You kind of want to get their feedback so you can structure then those objectives and hold them accountable. But yeah, if you can get them excited and communicate that, that's how good things happen. Where bad things happen is when you've got too many goals. You walk into one part of a plant or a store and ask them, hey, what's the one thing we're doing in this company? And you get different answers from everybody, from the person, at the machine or stocking the shelves, all the way up to the VP. You've got big problems. So making sure that it's simple and everybody knows, the direction, I very much agree, is, that's how you become successful. And that's how some of these companies that go from nothing and explode over 5-10 years, it's because they have that laser focus, as opposed to other companies that don't.
Yeah, and I feel like the companies that sort of rally around this idea are the ones that really start to move stuff forward. And
Mhm.
I mean, I kind of go back to my days in in supporting quality inside of organizations as well, right? So when we would do audit preparedness, I remember, one of the things that you had to have was like the company mission and things like that. During audits, oftentimes, this could be a key question and that people would get asked. And there were places in the organization where you could find all the safety information, all the, other information with regards to mission and other things. And one of the things that people would oftentimes forget in our particular case was that the mission was also printed on the back of your badge. And, and so, I mean, an audit preparedness, I mean, similar to goals, right? You could go up to somebody and say, what are your goals? And, how are things going with regards to, the process for you? And there's two levels of calibration here. One, you could make sure that somebody has them. And two, you could sort of test, are these ones that are in alignment with where the organization is or not? In our case, for audit preparedness, we would do the same thing. What is the mission of the organization? And people would spend time like, I got to go to a break room, or I got to do this. It's like, look, this thing is on the back of your badge. If you do get asked during one of these sessions, then make sure you look on the back of your badge, because we've given you the ultimate tool here. And, I think about that, how are you holding people, one, accountable, but also sort of validating that accountability as well. And I feel like, it's a key part of this, this as well. And so maybe we should talk a little bit about, best practices there. I certainly have seen people taken and have very focused sessions around goals, and especially whenever you have, OKRs in place, the expectation is that you're going to have frequent check-ins with regards to the OKRs. I also, though, I mean, I personally have always been a firm believer as a leader of people that you need to have frequent one-on-ones with your people, whether that's once a week, once every couple of weeks, or once a month, whatever it is. There should just be a regular frequency, depending on team size, where you have the opportunity to look at somebody directly face to face and say, okay, so how are things going? And a portion of that should be a check-in in terms of their goals. One of the things I used to oftentimes say to people is, look, if we get a quarter into the future, or half a year or a year into the future, and that's my first time checking in on your goals, shame on me as a leader, because I should have been asking you all along where we're at. And if we're off track, what are the plans to course correct? How are we going to, either get back on track, or, is there something just wrong with the way that we've sort of looked at the supporting activities towards the goal as well, to try and move us in the right direction. And so, I at least took accountability of that as a leader, and would have those regardless of, a system like, OKRs, where you're checking in much more frequently across, teams and things like that. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, so there's kind of two things I think about based on your feedback. I mean, the first is definitely one-on-ones are important. Without, if there's not strong governance in place for these goals and objectives, the least you can do is have the one-on-ones with your people to make sure that, they're aligned, that they understand what the goals are, they understand what in the objectives, they understand what their piece is in it. You can gauge where they are. If they're ahead, if they are at their target conditions, great. If they're ahead, great. Share best practices. If they're behind, what can I do to help? And having those constant calibration check-ins is just the most basic form to support and sort of help govern and communicate those goals. But I think the other thing that comes to mind is the term Gemba. So I think having a culture of Gemba is so critical to unlocking goals and gauging progress on objectives, because you're going and seeing, and you're asking questions, and your question should be around depending on whatever level it is, you should be gambling at all different levels. Certainly, you might gemba more, with your the people directly under you, but it may call for definite times where you need to gemba and walk through the plant and talk with the operators and things like that. And you should be checking in and asking them questions. Are they aligned to what the corporate goals are? Are they aligned to what their department goals are? What problems are they having? So it's a little bit more informal. You can formalize Gemba, write those things down and put them in a thing. But in the most basic sense, that's what effective leaders do. Whether it's the U.S. Army or whether, is it GlaxoSmithKline, the big ticket people that walk around, senior executives, colonels, generals, they're talking to everybody. They're trying to get a gauge and a feel, is everybody aligned with the key goal or goals, the strategic imperatives? Are they aligned? Do they even understand what's important with their department? They're taking the temperature. So, like you said, I think one-on-ones, if there's not a clear OKR structure where there's governance and there's ways to make those, get into PDPs, there's some HRIS system where, you can update where they are on deliverables and things like that. And that gets translated. I mean, there's a ton of ways to do that governance, but without that, just having the one-on-ones with your people, encouraging them to have one-on-ones with their people and so on and so forth, that trickles all the way down. And then doing Gemba as well, doesn't even have to be scheduled. Just walk through, take a look, see, does the plant look like it's a plant that is aligned to what our goals are and our objectives are, right? I mean, if it's to cut costs and lean things out, and we go there and we see, these value streams set up terribly, no cells, no U-shaped manufacturing, waste, all kinds of things. We know, we can see with our eyes, we know. And sometimes you just need to talk to some of the lower level people, because they'll actually give you the most honest feedback that maybe your senior executives might not be willing to give you. Without, like you said, without having that corporate structure in place, one-on-ones, Gembas is a very quick way to get in business, and get things communicated. And to your point as well about having things in the back of the badge, I'm a big fan of print it off, put it in the break room, put it in the hallway, put it in the bathroom. What do they call it? Swag. Get a little bit of your budget to make keychains with whatever it is on it. The more people, it's sort of a rule of 7 in communication. The more people hear it over different modalities, the more it sticks. So if they see it in the bathroom, you send out emails every so often, you have town halls, you have one-on-ones, you have Gembas, you've got it on the back of your thing. People, it's going to start seeping in better than just, saying it once or something like that. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, it's important to have things directly in line and as easy to use as possible as well. Whenever you're trying to achieve something, the more steps that somebody has to take, the more somebody has to think about stuff. All of these things kind of lead towards, us being non-compliant in a lot of different ways. But I also think about, this from a goal perspective, that, if the goals are set and they're ones that everybody is working to achieve, it should fall relatively in line as well, right? I mean, having, to your point, to use like Ulta as an example, right? If all of a sudden, they wanted to go do something different. Hey, look, we're going to have, instead of building buildings, we're, facing a tougher economy and things like that. We're going to start building huts. And oh, by the way, in these huts that essentially have, all of the things that we offer, we, are, going to make that a part of everybody's job. And at the same time, it becomes nobody's job. It's a good way to not achieve a goal, right? Is sort of to just deprioritize it, to your point earlier, from your comment from your dad, having those two priorities. Now, all of a sudden, okay, so how do I divide 50% of my time between these two
Yeah.
things? Because this one feels like it pulls me 100% of the time, and I don't feel like I have another, 50 to give.
Yeah. Well, it's also easy when you think about like, sometimes, well, in the US Army, in every operations order that's delivered, and I'm talking, operations orders are written and communicated for the smallest operation up to the withdrawal of Afghanistan. And there's always a paragraph that's short, and it's called the commander's intent. So with a lack of guidance or knowledge, what their intent is. So I sort of think I think about that as like having the one goal. There's so many times in somebody's professional career where it's unclear what the decision should be. It's unclear what the priorities should be for them or what they're doing, particularly in their department or their function. But if you've got one goal, uh, then you really just have one thing to measure it against. Is this helping or hurting that? Is it helping or hurting it more than doing this thing? That's easy to do. So that's easy to get people working on the thing for the goal. Now, if you've got 5 goals, and I've seen some of these companies and I've seen military units do this where they've got just a metric ton of priorities and they put, oh, here are our top 10 things. It's like, if I'm sitting here going, okay, I have this resource or I've got this extra time, now your eyes are bleeding because you're looking at 10 things like, how can I compare what's the best thing to work on? Then you just sort of decide what you think is the best. But if you've got one thing, like a commander's intent, this is, if anything else fails, I want to accomplish this. This is the intent. So if you don't understand anything else, just understand this. That's kind of why I like the one goal approach that you were talking about, Don.
Yeah, so I do think that it's important also to talk about the last piece for us today as well is, so let's say that we've done everything that we possibly could. We started the year by aligning our goals to the one sort of focal point inside of the organization. We decided that, hey, look, we check in frequently, and we did plenty of check-ins, throughout the year. Could see maybe as we go through the halfway point of the year that we're starting to fall more and more away from where the original goal was set. And as we close the year, we are by far off of where we were. Life happens, business happens, the external environment that we're all facing, and things like that. I've seen, again, sort of two ways to face into this. One is, hey, look, we're going to be tougher next year on goals, and we're going to just make this an even rougher, sort of process on the employees. The second way is, hey, look, this goal thing seems like a great thing, but we wasted a lot of effort this last year. And by the way, we're so far off, I don't know that it really mattered. And so I've seen sort of the two reactions. And I would love to sort of dive a little bit deeper in terms of ways that organizations can try and, piece together the vision for the future and paint the next year's sort of perspective in terms of goals as well.
Yeah, I'll give you a personal perspective because I eat my own dog food as far as how I do my life and how I coach clients. So this one's a little personal. So my son has pretty severe autism. He's nonverbal, and he's 5 years old. He's been in ABA therapy since he was 2. And initially, he's our oldest son. And initially, we didn't know much about autism at the time. So we took him to ABA therapy, and they assess him, and they come up with a list of goals. Okay, these are the things that we want to get done. We want to have him, doing this independently. We want to reduce these behaviors. We want to get him talking. And it was mostly around getting him talking and communicating. And initially, they had the goal, within 12 months, he's going to be able to say this and respond to his name and all these other things. And, he went pretty much full time. He's at one of the best ABA clinics where they treat their kids so well. Kids have fun. It's happy. It's not like, a dog boarding school or anything like that. It's very good program. But, after a year, as we were getting close to a year, he wasn't talking.
Mm.
And then another year came and he wasn't talking. So, it wasn't too long ago that we, really sat down with the director. We sat down with the sort of the executive team that owns the place, and we're like, hey, look, we have to understand what's going on here, because one of a few things happened. It's nobody's fault. We're not pointing fingers. We just need to understand, number one, did something, did we assess him wrong? That's number one. Did we not get it right? Is this goal unrealistic based on the resources that we have, and just based on the external factors, which we'll call just him and his condition? The second piece is, are we doing the wrong thing? Are we not doing the right things as far as the objectives to get to that goal? So talking about like the methods, the techniques, the things like that. So we've got 1 and 2, and then we've got 3. Did we assess them right? We have the right techniques. We've got the wrong people that just aren't able to deliver on this. What is it? And really, actually, we looked at, do we have too many goals? Are we working on too many things? So what we sort of realized in doing that was, number one, and this was pushed by me, we had too many goals for him to do. They had too many things they were trying to get him to do. So we really weren't focused on communication just in general. They're working on some other behavioral things, some things to get him prepared for like kindergarten. So no, we just need to focus on communication, number one. Number two, the goal wasn't really realistic. We needed to start with an ACA device, like an automated communication device with him. And if we can get him to communicate through electronic pictures and things, maybe that is a pathway to get him to talk. And ultimately, we scaled down the goals. We changed some of the ABA technicians that were better with communication in doing those. We implemented the ACA communication technique, and he started flourishing with communicating on that. He's getting better, and hopefully, now we'll be in a position over the next year or two, maybe he can start talking. And he might not. That's okay. We're going to love him the same. But I think, as far as translating it to business, you kind of have to approach it with the same thing. If we're going to say, hey, we want to be the best fast food company in the world, but you've got two branches, you're not going to be McDonald's. It's just not going to happen. You've got to set realistic goals. And if you do have a goal that you think you can attain, again, do you have too many goals? Like my son, too many, not the right goals. Are you doing the right techniques and the right things as far as those goals, the right objectives, and do you have the right people? So I think it's ultimately about recalibrating those things. And like I said, my son was kind of a personal example because, his condition is his condition. There's certain things that we can't change about, how that affects him, but we still can move forward and continue to work on his communication and get him to a place. Because if he ends up communicating with just a device, that's great. He'll have a quality of life. He can talk to people through his device, all those kind of good things. But if we just keep at this, well, he's not talking, we got to keep him talking and talking, but we're not actually working on getting him to communicate. We did him a disservice. So it's kind of hopefully that made sense, but it's kind of a way of taking a complex goal, breaking it down, making it more simple, making it more realistic, having the right people work on it, being more specific about the techniques and things that you're using. And like I said, just being realistic. So that's sort of the same way I advise, my clients when they've gotten to a place where they haven't attained their goals. It's not a browbeat session we're going to have. We're not just going to start firing everybody. We're not going to say the goals are right. We need to talk about, again, right goals, right people, right timing, things like that, in external factors, and recalibrate that way, and do it systematically. Because like you said, if you go into the next year and you go either extreme, like, it doesn't matter, we're just whatever, throwing the towel, or if you just like, nope, well, I'm just going to cane people until we hit the goal. That's the complete wrong way to do it. So that makes sense, Don?
Yes. So I wanted to thank you, first of all, for sharing that very personal story. So, obviously, one that definitely touches you and your family overall. So thank you for sharing that. But I feel like it was very relevant that so there's this, the one thing that I kind of thought that you might bring up, based on the question, is my understanding is the military has like after action reports as well,
Yeah.
that essentially whether something goes right or goes wrong, essentially take a look at it
After
and see.
everything we do,
Yeah,
everything, you have to have it. Yep.
see what could be done better, what was done right, etc., so that hopefully we grow, we learn, and can change. And oftentimes I feel like, why wouldn't you do the same thing, with goals, more or less towards the end of the year? And I feel like there's, even inside of larger corporations, right? You have this evaluation period that typically happens at the end of every calendar year. And in that calendar year, it's an opportunity to have an honest discussion about what went right and what went wrong. And what was funny, sort of with larger teams that I've led, we would do this, with all of the managers. So essentially all of the managers would get in a room and we would talk about, the performance of everybody, across all the goals, including my performance, right? So how did I perform, from my team's eyes, but then also how did I feel like my team, performed, and how did their people perform, so that we could learn. I mean, the whole goal of this exercise was that at the end of the day, we walk away with, these are the things that we could do better, not necessarily just to, sort of tell people, hey, look, here's what you could have done better to contribute, but so that the goal setting process at the end of the day gets better and the organization gets better as well. And that was my version of an after action report, overall, was to try and get the team to sort of work through, what worked, what didn't, and how do we recalibrate this so that next year, whenever we go through this process, that it's one that we, one, feel better about, but also can really achieve the things that we set out as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to your point about the military, one of the things that the military is always going through inspections. Always, they're inspecting everything we do, and there's always an inspection of after action reports that are done after specifically collective training events. They're encouraged for individual, type of training, but specifically for big training events and collective training events. But they're not just looking for that. They're not just looking for it to be documented. They want to see that in that after action report, the things that you said that you didn't do well, and how you're going to get better. They want to see that in your plans, your 90-day plan, your 180-day plan, your 3-year plan. They want to be able to see that you're actually using that and not just doing it as a check the box. A lot of people, they'll show up to AARs or they won't because, I'm too busy for this. And it is critical. It's really important, especially if you're talking about your goal as an organization. Everybody needs to be accountable. And then when we come out of that, it has to be documented, and we've got to use this to get better. We need to make changes. But it's no different than, a business review or, a stand-up where we're looking at performance on a weekly basis or a quarterly basis. Are we where we want to be? Yes or no? And if we're not, why? And what actions do we need to take to get there? And there needs to be accountability of those things. So like for my story with my son, it was no different. We meet, with our doctors and things on a quarterly basis. And, we have those discussions, and there's really no other way to do it. But there's a lot of organizations, because I consult with a lot of companies, I know you do too, where they don't do after action reviews. They just
Yeah.
simply don't do them.
Yeah.
And it's insane to me. And if you do ask, hey, we need to do this, people will treat it like it's like it's the lowest priority meeting, and you'll get limited attendance, limited energy. And I think that starts culturally from the top.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I want to bring us to close here. I really appreciated your thoughts, Ron, in terms of goals. Hopefully, somebody got something from this session as well. And if you are listening to this, so there is an audio version of this that we've been releasing, on the different podcast channels as well. It's not on Apple yet because I haven't taken the time to apply, but eventually it will be out on Apple, but certainly on Spotify and YouTube and things like that. So, people can pick it up there. Also, if you want to join us live, we're doing these Thursdays, noon Eastern, on LinkedIn and YouTube. So look for the Productivity Power Hour there. And Ron, you want to talk about Propellant Consulting for a second?
Yeah, for anybody that wants to find me, they can find me on propellantconsulting.com. You can find me, Ronald Eggert, on LinkedIn. I've got a LinkedIn page, Propellant Consulting. I also have a YouTube channel. You just type in Propellant Consulting, you'll find the website. You can find me on LinkedIn. Everything sort of cross-references each other, so I'm easy to get a hold of, and would love to have a conversation for anybody that needs support with their business.
Yeah, and I can be found at two places. I have a digital marketing company, which is in part the reason why I do a lot of these things. So D3 Digital Marketing is a digital marketing company, and then also Improving Processes at improvingprocesses.com is where you can find me there. In most other locations, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn or any other place that you want to try and find me, it's pretty easy. It's Don Davis, PhD, MBA. And so if you search for that, you should find me all over the place. So thanks a lot for watching or listening. And thanks, Ron, for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. It's great being here.
Thanks a lot.